All right, it's 7 o'clock. We'd like to reconvene our public hearing at this time. We have a redistricting precinct ordinance. I guess they turn that over to Matt, right?
Yes, sir. Let me turn my mic on and I'll try to walk everyone through this. You have two ordinances you're considering tonight. The first one is an ordinance providing for the apportionment of members of the Middlesex County Board of Supervisors and establishing boundary lines of the election districts, naming each election district and repealing the prior ordinance. And then the next ordinance you'll be considering, I guess in the next public hearing, is an ordinance providing for the precincts. Real quick, why are we here? Every 10 years, the United States does a census, as we are very familiar, and we are required by law to have a fairly equitable balance in the number of people in each election district. So based on the recent census results in the 2020 census, we have to kind of rebalance the population a little bit. You'll notice, and I've tried to make this Excel spreadsheet as legible from the room as practicable. Hopefully y'all can see this. But we are allowed a deviation from the average size of 2125 per election district, 2125 population per election district. We're allowed a deviation of 2231 on the high side, meaning we can have a maximum of 2231 in an election district. And we can have a minimum number in an election district of 2019 or 2019. That's our deviation. You'll notice that this year's census has us over in the Pine Top District, 2262, and under in the Harmony Village District at 2009. So indeed, we do have to rebalance. And what this ordinance does, and I'll go to the map in a moment, is adjust some census blocks into other election districts, in a sense, shifting Pine Top and Hartfield districts further east, and then moving the Harmony Village District a tad bit east, and moving the Jamaica District a tad bit east, and it will become more clear when we display the map. And that gets our populations with the proposed districts within the range, within the deviation we're allowed between 2231 and 2019. The largest proposed election district at 2162 is the Saluda District, and the smallest proposed is the Hartfield District at 2092, much closer to the average that we need to try to maintain of 2125. That's a very jumbled spreadsheet, but essentially that's the bottom line in the short and skinny. And we can come back to that later in the presentation if needs be. Next, I'd like to show the map. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm going to go to the podium because I can see this a little better and point to it a little better from up there, if my laser pointer will work as well. Do you want lights off back here, or are you good? It would be nice. It would probably help the public see better. Okay, am I on here? Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go over the key changes to the election districts. This is the proposed election district. Glenn Nix, our GIS coordinator, helped produce this. He did a great job. He assisted the board in the work session as well. So essentially what's happening is the area around Bushy Park Campground, and I apologize, I'm using a laser pointer more for the public's benefit tonight than the board's. These are essentially the same areas that we discussed in the work session, with the exception of Wilton Creek Road, which I'll get to in a moment. In fact, Kevin, is it possible for you to come in and zoom in on these areas while I point to them? I appreciate you. So the area around Bushy Park Campground from Mallard and Wild Goose on, that little peninsula there, would be in a sense shifted from the Pine Top District into Hartfield. There we go, thank you. So I think it's Wild Goose Road and Mallard Road. Areas west of that would be shifted over into the Hartfield District. Meanwhile, pretty much everything on the South Road, from Horse Point Road all the way down Wilton Creek Road, would be shifted into the Pine Top District. Then carrying east, or carrying west rather, the line between the Harmony Village District remains pretty much the same, with the exception that where it ends currently, I think along Bob's Hole Road, it would come all the way in to almost Hartfield proper, west of Regent Point Road to a drainage way that feeds into Mill Creek, and then take pretty much the entirety, well, it would take the entirety of Regent Point into Harmony Village District. So that district shifts east as well. And then the changes to the Saluda district would be the areas around Christ Church to, I believe it's Few Acres Road, would shift into Saluda, west of Few Acres Road, I believe it is, if you can zoom in, Kevin. I don't have my glasses. Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that's really the only change between those two districts with that line. The area around Christ Church to Few Acres Road shifts to the Saluda district. And Jamaica shifts slightly east to a drainage way feeding into Urbana Creek. And pretty much everything west of, or east and west of Town Bridge Road to that drainage way. And then follows Highway 17 all the way to the county line. Currently, the Jamaica District cuts through some properties over to the Jamaica Swamp, the Dragon Run Swamp. So we actually have a better line of demarcation along Highway 17 there. Areas around Town Bridge Road would shift into the Jamaica District. Those are the very few changes that were needed to be made to the election districts to get a better population balance and also preserve communities of interest. The racial demographics in the area is something the Justice Department looks for to make sure that you're not diluting communities of interest votes. This does not. In fact, it probably strengthens those communities of interest in those election districts. So that's the changes on the map. I'm going to pause now to see if there are any questions. Okay. Why are the lines drawn the way they are? I had a question right before we recessed, or actually just after our recess from our morning meeting or day meeting. Why don't you follow, say, 911 address and use 911 addresses as your delineation? It's a very good question. It makes good sense from the community standpoint. Why don't you use people's tax map property lines and their 911 addresses as indicators of where lines are? Because they could change. Property lines can move or be vacated. There is a very old, I would go along with some people saying it may be a little archaic. It could be made more modern. But there's a pretty archaic law written back in the 80s that say your election districts need to be observable boundaries. They need to follow natural features. They need to follow roads, things that aren't likely to change. And you couple that with how the census blocks are drawn to come up with your election districts. So you can't, for instance, cut a census block, even if you have a very good geographic feature like a creek that you want to follow. If it's one census block, you can't cut that because then you have no way of telling how many population are on one side of the creek or the other. I won't get into the minutia on it. Suffice it to say, this map is drawn by the best geographic indicators that we had, roads, and of course, census block data. There are no census blocks that are split by this map. We follow the census block lines. And that may mean, and that does mean that we don't really take into consideration someone's address, one tax map parcel or the other. It's following those census block boundaries, and they generally follow the geographic features. So that's why we don't use people's addresses. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my seat because that's all I needed to do with that. Thanks, Dad.
You finished, Matt?
One more quick point.
Okay.
And it was something that John in the Hartfield District pointed out. Pine Top and Hartfield are smaller in this example. I'll go back to the Excel spreadsheet. In population, Pine Top and Hartfield are now the least populated districts. They're still within our deviation range. And I won't say that we gave this a whole lot of thought, but it was a very convenient side effect of how the population shift happens. These happen to be the two fastest growing districts. They also have the highest potential for future growth in undeveloped lots and whatnot. By us establishing these election district boundaries the way they are, it is my hope, and hopefully I won't be here in 10 years, I'll be retired and watching from out there, but hopefully 10 years from now you won't have to redraw the district lines, that this will kind of settle into more permanence, because you'll get the population growth in Pine Top, you'll get the population in Hartfield, but it will stabilize, and hopefully we won't have to shift the election boundaries in 10 years, in 2030. But I make no promises. It just looks like that will probably pan out. And if it does, I'll come and take credit for it. If it doesn't, you won't hear from me. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, I would like to open up the public hearing on this. Each speaker will give his or her name and address for the record. Each speaker or individual will be given the opportunity to speak, and all comments and remarks will be addressed to the Board of Supervisors and not the audience. At this time, do we have someone that would like to address the board at this time? Public hearing. Anybody?
You all wanted to speak on this topic?
And we're speaking on redistricting.
I'm not speaking on that.
Oh, well, you could, well, public hearing later will be before that. This is only for redistricting right now.
There'll be public comment after.
There will be public
Okay.
comment after that.
After this?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Normally, you don't have a comment afterwards, that's why I was wondering.
No, we will.
Okay.
This is the public hearing on it. Then the last one would be public comments.
Okay.
This is a public hearing on redistricting.
All right.
Do we have anybody who would like to address the board on the redistricting, public hearing redistricting? If not, I'd like to close the public hearing on a redistricting and open up to the board. What's the will of the board? Any question? If not, do we have a motion to approve the redistricting ordinance?
So moved.
Have a motion by John. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by John, second by Lud. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Coontz?
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield is not present. Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye. Motion so carried.
Mr. Chairman, before I pull the map down, I would like to point out one very important aspect, and that is Parrots Island is in the heart of the.
All right. Okay. All right, our next public hearing tonight. Thank you. Next public hearing tonight, Mr. Chairman, is on the precincts. The precincts remain largely unchanged, with the exception that the exterior boundaries of the election districts had us really need to redraw the boundaries. For instance, we have two precincts in the Saluda district, one in Urbana and one in Saluda. So the precinct boundaries between those two had to be delineated in relationship to the new exterior boundaries of those districts. The names remain the same and the polling places remain the same. And you have a copy of that ordinance in your packet. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Okay. All right. Next.
Public
Oh,
hearing.
you need a public, okay, I thought you were. All right, well, at this time, we're gonna have the public hearing on the Middlesex Precinct Ordinance. And at this time, I would say each speaker will be given his or her name and address for the record. Each speaker will be, or individual will be given the opportunity to speak, and all comments will be addressed to the Board of Supervisors. And this is for the Middlesex Precinct Ordinance. Do we have, open the ordinance hearing on that? Does anybody have any questions on that or like to speak on it? If not, I'd like to close it and open up to the board. Do we have a motion to approve the Middlesex County Precincts Ordinance?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Reggie, probably second by John. Any more discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion so carried. Next, we have our revenue sharing ordinance. Matt Walker?
Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
Shocked look on your face was me, not what?
Well, so, Mr. Chairman, this has been a little bit time and been in the works for a little bit, but essentially what this is Virginia law has changed, and it now allows localities to adopt a revenue sharing ordinance for solar energy, battery storage, energy systems projects and such. So it's been in your packet, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it, but it is almost verbatim from the statute, so I can't
Okay.
claim any creativity.
All right, all right. Well, this is time I would like to open the public hearing on this revenue sharing ordinance. Each speaker will be given his or her name and address for the record. Each speaker or individual will be given the opportunity to speak, and all comments and remarks will be addressed to the Board of Supervisors. At this time, the public hearing is open for revenue sharing ordinance. Do we have anyone that would like to address the board? If not, I will close it. And also, will we have a motion to approve the revenue sharing ordinance?
So moved.
I have a motion by John. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by John, probably second by Lud. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion so carried. Now, next will be the public comment period. At this time, each speaker will be given his or her name, addressed for the record. Each speaker or individual will be given the opportunity to speak, and all comments and remarks will be addressed to the board and not the audience. At this time, I'm opening the public comment period.
This is, okay, so we've got one, speaker number one is Robert Roberts. Make sure the microphone is still on.
I think I left it on, but you can double check.
You did?
Yep.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Most interesting so far. Robert Roberts. I live in Topping, directly across from the runway of our airport. And that's what brings me here today. I'm going to speed this up. I am on the airport committee, and I'm enjoying that. Thank you for trusting me with that. Anyway, there's a few things, a code of ethics that comes into play here, and I'm not going to get into it. Y'all look them up. It's going to cover the subject. My property, I like the point that my property is rising in value. I like that part. Paying the taxes, not so much. I don't like that part. There's a couple people in the county. There's two people in this county that are the most adversely impacted. And I put up security cameras. I don't know how many megabytes, but there's enough airplane coverage here. It'll take you months to look at it all. And what I have to, to tolerate, and the other person has to tolerate. And you can't understand it because you don't live there. And I don't think that, when I look at the ordinances against noise, and I see, the penalties for people that inflict noise pollution on other people, they have to pay a price. We are asked to tolerate it and pay for it, the service. And when I first got into this, I wrote down the planes, and there's hundreds of them. I'm hoping that the new runway shifting will take care of some of this, but I don't think so. I mean, and I like the airport. I do. I want to get a pile of slices. That's one of the reasons why I came here. But, you know, there's a big old field over there, and I made a deal to take down some trees to be a good neighbor. I had 3 trees on 11 acres, and I took down 2 of them. And I didn't have to. I did it to be a good neighbor. Well, a lot of them people, you got, I think it's 7 people that are in the county, and the rest of them are outside of the county. So let me see, I pay taxes for this county, and you know, you got all those people that come over here and fly over top of my house. I've got shingles all over the yard. I got to have to replace my roof. You know, helicopters come in, they really put a whooping on the roof. I know my thing is going here. I ask you to give some consideration. It's just not fair that I have to pay the same amount, and the other person that is impacted with this, it's just not fair. And think about that for us and, you know, do it. I don't know what the answer is. I shouldn't just have to pay the amount that other people are paying. I just don't. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robert. You got no name?
Yes, I have one more public speaker. Michael Nez.
Correct. I'm Mike Nez. I live at Locust Hill in the county. I'm here to speak on the monument. This is a difficult thing to talk about because it's not easy to represent all the people's viewpoints, which I think is important. I don't know when the board is going to address this issue of the monument in front of this building or the memorabilia, the Confederate memorabilia. I don't know if it ever is going to address it, but I'm assuming that in the new year you will. The referendum was, though 3-1 in favor of keeping the monument, has not really settled the issue, not in my mind. The issue will not be settled regardless of what you all do. If you were to remove it, it wouldn't be settled. If you were to keep it, it wouldn't be settled. Because it's not settled in our communities, our understanding of what it represents. And until we come to an understanding of the history behind this monument and behind this memorabilia, and we have some kind of consensus around this, we're always going to be dealing with it. It's I don't believe that 70-some% of the voters that voted to keep this monument voted that way for the same reason. Some of them might want it because they think they still venerate the lost cause of the Confederacy. Maybe they just want to keep it because they think it honors their ancestors. They might want to keep it because they think it's history. It represents history. Or that it's a reminder of an evil, dark time, and we shouldn't, by getting rid of it, we're getting rid of that reminder. I believe that it is a symbol of an era in the history of this county of a cause that was predicated on the proposition that all people are not created equal. All right, we can debate the cause of the Civil War, whether it was just a matter of secession and Yankee aggression, whether the South had the legal right or the God-given right to secede. But whatever that is, the bottom line was they fought to keep people enslaved. And if the history of the war is kind of muddled, why it happened, the aftermath is not. Reconstruction was a period where we had a chance for a new way. And then when the Reconstruction ended, it was an era of white supremacy without anything holding them back. And that's what this monument represents to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nez. All right. Yeah. Come on up, Mr. Perkins. I know you're not on it, but you out here
Thank you,
want to speak.
Mr.
I'm gonna let you
Chairman.
speak.
I'll take this, my name's Russ Perkinson. I'm a trustee, property owner, Harmony Village District on Grace Point Road. I'm going to speak tonight just about the speed limit issue as discussed in the regular meeting this morning, and I'd like to say I agree with the statements made by two of our supervisors, Williams and Kuntz, earlier about concerns with that road. And my concern is how the speed limit, how it sounds like VDOT's making the determination. It sounds as if from a previous meeting I attended, they mainly just look at how fast people drive right now on a given stretch of road. And that's a little bit counterintuitive to me because it seems like, speed limits are regulation, and it seems like that regulation for speed limits in place to protect public safety. Yet it appears state's process, maybe exclusively, the impression I get may not be true, but the impression I get it's exclusively about how fast people are driving now. So certainly that ought to be a part of the picture, but I support the board's efforts to question that process. Where I am on Grace Point Road, we could probably stand to consider an adjustment. I'm not saying do it, but right there near Hummel Field and to the campground, people come flying around there. Can hardly get my tractor across the road some days to do any work in the field or anything. But since people drive close to the current speed limit, state's apparently process does seem illogical to me. I mean, if people drove 45 on that road, they'd probably say, okay, we'll change it to 45. But it seems like if they think people are driving 57 or whatever it is, hey, we'll post it at 55 because that's what people are doing. So again, I think intent needs to be largely protect the public, users of the road, and the residents in the area. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Russ Perkins. All right. All right, at this time, I'd like to close the public comment, and upcoming meeting will be Tuesday, January the 4th, 2022 at 3 p.m. At this time, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by John, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by John, probably second by Reggie. Roll call.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Kuntz.
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye. And I wish everybody a Merry Christmas if I don't see you between now and then.